Vladimir Putin's dream of a greater Russia is coming to an end on Russia's highways. Road transport, the backbone of the country's logistics, is experiencing its deepest crisis in 17 years. Due to the fuel crisis, sanctions, and rising costs, nearly 7,000 transport companies are on the brink of bankruptcy. When trucks stop, shelves empty. If shelves empty, Russia stops. Today, we reveal how the collapse of Russian highways is bringing hunger to Russian tables. We warned you about the fuel crisis. Now we are seeing the domino effect. Trans.info is reporting a disaster. 7,000 road transport companies are on the brink of bankruptcy. This is not just a business failure, it is a national emergency. In a country spanning 11 time zones, trucks mean life. Trucks bring food to cities and medicine to villages. However, the truck transport sector is struggling under sanctions, fuel shortages, and a 21% interest rate. And the first victim is your dinner table. You need to see the reality hidden behind state television's cooking shows. To understand the magnitude of this crisis, we must first look at geography. Russia spans a vast area of 17 million square kilometers. In this geography, logistics is not a luxury, but a biological necessity. Russia's railway network is extensive, yes, but right now, those railways are reserved for Putin's war. The wagons are busy transporting tanks, ammunition, and soldiers to the front. The cargo trains that used to carry food, medicine, and clothing for civilians have been replaced by war trains. That is why the highway was the last lifeline for the Russian people. The highways from Moscow to Siberia, from the Urals to Vladivostok, were the only artery keeping the country's civilian economy alive. But now, that artery is also blocked. Why? Mezhya calls this the deepest crisis in 17 years. Mikhail Ustyuzhanin, president of Leader Trans, says fuel, maintenance, and salary costs have increased by 50%. Behind this lies Ukraine's strategic genius. Ukraine targeted Russia's soft underbelly, its oil refineries. Since the beginning of 2025, 21 of Russia's 38 largest refineries have been hit by Ukrainian drones. In particular, the distillation towers of giant facilities such as Syzran, Ryazan, and Nizhny Novgorod were destroyed. The result? Russia's refinery capacity has fallen by 17 to 20%. The country has crude oil, but no facilities to convert it into diesel for trucks. As supply decreased, prices skyrocketed. Diesel prices in Russia have reached astronomical levels compared to before the war. The price per liter jumped from 65 rubles to the 85 to 90 ruble range. On the black market, this figure exceeds 100 rubles. A truck's tank holds an average of 800 to 1,000 liters of fuel. This means that a driver has to pay approximately 70,000 to 85,000 rubles at once to fill up the tank. For transport companies, this is a death sentence. Freight rates have fallen by 33%, while fuel costs have risen by 20%. Companies are losing money every time they turn on the ignition. But the problem isn't just the high cost. It's that even if you have the money, you can't find fuel. The Kremlin has limited diesel sales to civilian trucks to 200 liters per vehicle to ensure the army's tanks have enough fuel. Picture the map of Russia, a geography spread across 11 time zones, where the distance between two cities can be thousands of kilometers. For a heavy vehicle operating at -30 degrees Celsius, which must never turn off its engine, 200 liters means the tank is empty. With that fuel, you'd barely make it from Moscow to St. Petersburg. A driver needs at least 1,500 liters of fuel to get from Novosibirsk to Moscow. What does the 200-liter limit mean? It means the driver has to stop every 500 to 600 kilometers, wait in line for hours, pay bribes, or buy fuel at exorbitant prices on the black market. This turns a 3-day delivery into a 10-day ordeal. Logistics speed decreases, driver costs increase, and vehicles wear out. The fuel crisis was the final nail in the coffin, but other factors also contributed to the grave. Western sanctions hit Russia's truck fleet. Spare parts for durable European trucks like Volvo, Scania, and MAN are unavailable. A fortune is paid on the black market for a brake pad or engine part. Half of the fleets are rotting in garages, waiting for parts. Cannibalism has begun. They are dismantling one truck to run another. Russian hauliers have turned to Chinese trucks like Sitrak and Shackman instead of European trucks. However, the prices of these trucks have doubled compared to before the war. Moreover, they are not very resistant to Russia's harsh winter conditions and break down frequently. The recycling fee for new trucks will rise to 3 million rubles in 2026. This is a complete disaster. Small companies are returning the trucks they rented because they cannot afford the payments. The investment model has collapsed. It is no longer profitable to transport goods. That's why they are stopping transportation. When trucks stop transporting goods, prices begin to rise. Let's talk about butter, the most absurd symbol of this crisis. Newsweek and the Moscow Times report that butter prices have skyrocketed by 30% to 50%. Why? Because the cost of transporting milk has doubled. Because imported palm oil is stuck at the border. The situation is so desperate that supermarkets in St. Petersburg and Moscow are locking butter in security boxes usually reserved for expensive alcohol or caviar. In Moscow, 2 men robbed a supermarket. What was their loot? 25 packs of butter. Now they face 10 years in prison. Just think about it. 10 years in the gulag for butter. Putin has reduced his people to such a desperate state. It's like Les Miserables, but in 2025 Russia. However, butter is a luxury compared to the humble potato, and even that is becoming unaffordable. Reuters reports on the rise in potato prices, which is hitting Russia's poorest hardest. Potatoes are the Russian people's survival food. If you have no money, you eat potatoes. But due to a shortage of drivers and high fuel costs, getting potatoes from the fields to the cities has become very expensive. The Borscht Index, which measures the cost of making a simple soup, is rising faster than wages. When the poor can no longer afford potatoes, you're not just facing inflation, you're also preparing the ingredients for revolution.
Картошка. Это катастрофа просто. Вот я уж капусту себе не позволяю лишний раз купить. А картошку сейчас это беда совсем.
This isn't just happening in Moscow. Look at the regions. In Samara, residents are sharing videos of completely empty shelves. No eggs, no chicken, no vegetables. Local authorities blamed the weather. But even on days when the weather is good, the shelves remain empty. The truth is that the logistics chain to the regions has broken down. Large retailers are prioritizing Moscow to please the elite, leaving rural areas to starve. A grocer in Penza told a reporter, "No flour, no hope." This is the general mood of the nation. The patriotic war on TV isn't filling stomachs. While there's a fuel and parts crisis inside, there's a full-scale blockade outside. Russia's border crossings have turned into metal lakes. The European Union didn't just close its doors to Russian-plated trucks, it sealed them shut. This has been the death knell for thousands of transport companies that have the most modern, best-equipped truck fleets in Russia and have been operating on European routes for years. Most of those 7,000 bankrupt companies are large firms whose route was Europe and now have nowhere to go. How does this closure affect the Russian people? It's simple and brutal math. Goods coming from Europe can no longer cross the border directly. They enter via smuggling routes, traveling thousands of kilometers through Turkey, Kazakhstan, or Georgia. This triples the price of goods on the shelf. When the EU door closed, it wasn't just French cheese that was cut off. Vital cancer drugs, insulin, and spare parts for industrial machinery that Russia cannot produce were also cut off. A patient in Moscow cannot find their medicine. A factory in Tolyatti halts production because its German-made machine has broken down. When the West closed its doors, Russia turned helplessly to its friend, China. Look at the Zabaykalsk and Blagoveshchensk border crossings. These are old and inadequate infrastructures, designed for the suitcase trade of 10 years ago. But now, Russia's entire import burden rests on these narrow gates. The result is logistical paralysis. The number of trucks waiting at the border exceeds 500 on average. Transit times are extending to 12 days, and in some cases up to 20 days. Drivers are living in their metal cabins for weeks at minus 30 degrees Celsius. China has restricted truck crossings to protect its own economic interests. The situation at the Kazakh border is even more dire. Inspections have been tightened due to fears of secondary sanctions. There is a backlog of 7,500 trucks at the Mashtakovo border crossing. Some drivers are reported to have waited 47 days. This is not trade, this is logistical torture. Russian factories are at a standstill, shelves are emptying, because parts from China are not arriving. Poland and the Baltic countries have not officially closed their borders, but they are implementing an Italian strike. Every truck, every document, every pallet is subject to microscopic scrutiny. The goal? To block the drugs and machine parts that Russia is trying to smuggle in through the back door from Europe. The result? The border crossing time has increased to 14 days. This is not trade, this is logistical torture. How are the authorities responding? In a ridiculous way. Dairy producers blamed the butter shortage on ice cream. They claimed that Russians were eating too much ice cream and consuming all the cream. This is gaslighting on a national scale. They are blaming consumers. They blame the weather. They blame the West. But they never blame the war that is killing drivers, destroying refineries, and driving transport companies into bankruptcy. The breakdown of order is leading to bizarre scenes. Next to TV shared a video of a magician stealing oranges. It looks funny, but it's tragic. If ordinary people resort to petty theft to steal fruit, it means society's edges are fraying. This is the availability crisis turning into an accessibility crisis. The food may be there, but you don't have the money to buy it, so you steal it. Why can't shipping companies hire more drivers? Because the drivers are in the trenches. Mobilization has dried up the labor pool. A truck driver could also be an excellent tank driver or logistics operator for the Army. The Army pays signing bonuses that a bankrupt trucking company cannot offer. So while trucks rust in yards, the men who should be driving them are dying in Avdiivka. This is a demographic suicide pact. The crisis is also wiping out small businesses. With transportation costs rising by 33%, only large retail chains have the power to build their own fleets. Small, independent truckers, the backbone of Russia's middle class, are disappearing. This centralization means less competition and higher prices for everyone. This is the Sovietization of the market. History sometimes repeats itself like rhyming poems. The scene we see today on Russia's highways and in its markets reminds us of a very familiar nightmare: the collapse of the Soviet Union. In 1990, it wasn't just Western democracy or nuclear weapons that brought down the Soviet Empire. What brought it down was distribution paralysis. That year, Soviet fields produced record harvests of potatoes and wheat. However, 40% of that produce rotted in the fields. Why? Because the trucks to transport them to the cities were broken, there was no fuel, and the logistics chain had been severed. Just like back then, Russia's problem today is not production, but transportation. By dedicating the railways entirely to the war machine, to the transport of tanks and ammunition, Putin has condemned the civilian economy to the highways. And now, with the bankruptcy of 7,000 companies, that road artery has also been severed, and Russia is returning to that dark winter of 1991. During the Soviet era, people would board food trains traveling from the countryside to Moscow to find food. Today, from Vladivostok to Samara, people are once again staring at empty shelves. Back then, the shelves were empty because the system was cumbersome. Today, the shelves are empty because the system has collapsed. Putin described the collapse of the Soviet Union as the greatest geopolitical catastrophe of the century. But ironically, he is now repeating the very same logistical mistakes that led to that catastrophe, only on a larger scale. Empires don't die on battlefields, they die in the supermarket lines of starving people. And Russia has already joined that line. What do you think? Will food shortages spark mass protests in Russia? Can Putin survive if the people go hungry? I really want to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below. If you want to see the reality of the war economy that mainstream media overlooks, hit the like button and subscribe.